Bereshis, Amar Yitzchak, Lehaya Tzarech Lahaskal Hatar El Mechadesh Hazav V'Gomer. Chasav Haramban Zal, Afal Pisha Tzarech Gadol Hu, Lahaskal Hatar Mi Bereshis Bara V'Chulei, Ki Hu Sharish HaEmuna, Hu Mi She'inoi Ma'amin Bazeh, V'Choshev, She'Ha'olam Kadmoin, Kofer Be'ikr V'In Lei Torah Klal, Mikol Makom Kivan Shemasa Bereshis Soidomok Hu Me'oid, V'Inoi Muvan Min HaMikra'os, V'loi Yoivada al Barav Elami Pi HaKabbalah V'Yoidav Chayavim Lahastir Esai Lakach Amar B'Yitzchak Shaloi HaYatzarech Lahaskal Mi'Bereshis L'Saper Inyan HaYetzira V'Amabel V'Dar HaFlaga V'Yav Spik La'anshe HaTorah Bil'adei HaKsuvim Ha'ela V'Yaminu B'Chlal Kanizker B'hem Basar Sadibres Ki Sheshes Yamim Asa Hashem Es Shemayim V'Zaretz V'Gomer V'Tishaer HaYidia L'Yechidim Shebehem Halacha L'Moshe Misinai HaTorah Shebal Peh V'Nasan Rabbi Yitzchak Tam L'Zeh Ki Eschalas HaTorah Mi'Bereshis Bara V'Siper Kol Yemei HaYetzira Ad Brias Adam V'Shehamshila B'Maaseh Yadav V'Chol Shas Tachas Raglav V'Gan Eden Shehu Mivchar HaMekoymos HaNivram B'Olam Hazeh Nasa Mochen L'Shivtoi Ad Shegirish Osei Chetoi Misham V'Anshe Dor HaMabul B'Chatam Garshoi Min HaOlam Kuloi V'Atzadik B'Hem Levadai Nimlat Hu Vanav V'Zaram V'Chatam Garam Lahem Lahafitzam B'Mkoymos Uzroyosam B'Artzos Ulizharoisam B'Artzos V'Tafsu Lahem HaMekoymos L'Mishbechoisam L'Goyeham K'fi Shenizdamin Lahem Imken Ra'oi Hu Ka'asher Yosef Hagoy Lachtoi She'yaved Mi'Mekoymos V'Yavoi Acher L'Reshes Es Artzoi Ki Chen Mishpat Elohim Ba'Eretz L'Olam Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Lo HaYatzarech Lahaskal HaTorah Ela Me'achodesh Hazelechem Shehi Mitzvah Rishona Shenitana LiYisrael Afal Gav De'ika Shiva Mitzvah Shenitztavu Livnei Noach Umila LaAvram Mikol Makom L'Chol Yisrael Lo Nitztavu Ve'akati Lo Nafki Michlal B'nei Noach Perush Rashi Ma'atam Pasach B'Bereshis Mishum Koach Masav Higid La'amai Laseis Lahem Nachlas Goyim She'em ye'omru umas ha'olam listimatem she'kavashtem lachem artzis shivas goyim hem ye'omru lahem kol ha'aretz shalab hakadosh baruch hu unisana la'asher yasher be'enav b'ritzonei nasna lahem u'b'ritzonei nitala mehem unisana lanu arkan v'tema halay nifla mitchila b'chalkoi shal shem Nafla mitchila bechalkei shel shem, kedefirish Rashi beParshas Lech Lecha, v'Hakanani az ba'eretz v'ksiv umalki tzedek melech shalom v'gomer. Perish Rashi sha haya haylech v'koyvesh mizarei shel shem. V'yesh lomer d'shem haya melech al Yerushalayim levad shenikra melech shalom aval kol shar haaretz lo nafla bechalkei. Mikol makom temahu v'alei Kanan haya eved la'achav avda deman nachse deman umihu. Gam bazei yishlemer dafal pisha haya eved l'chol echav lama yichu b'nei shem nechasav yoser mi b'nei yafes. Perish Rashi shemilas bereshis devuka bara. Perish bereshis berias shemayim va'aretz haya kach sha'aretz ha'yisasayu v'vayu v'yamar vayomer eleihem yi'ar l'fi zeloi perish shum bria berishayin ela ha'ar. Ramban Perish Bereshis Bara V'Gomer Shemitchila Bara Me'ayin Yisoy Dak Me'ain Yisoy Dak She'ain By Mamish Ela Shehu Kayach Mamtzi Muchan L'Kabel Tzura Uletzeis Min HaKayach Ela Pel V'hu HaChomer Harishon Hanikra B'Lashon Yavani Hiyuli Umilas Bara Hi Haitzaas Yesh me ayin. V'achar zel loy hoitzi yesh me ayin ela me oisei chomer hadak halbish l'kol echad tzura v'yitzrei v'tikunoi v'siknoi v'hi milas yoitzer v'hashemayim yotzar v'hashemayim v'chol asher bam chomer echad v'haaretz v'chol asher ba chomer acher. V'akadosh baruch hu bar elu shnayim levadam yesh me ayin v'akol nasa mehem v'zeh HaChomer Hadak Nikra Toihu Miloshoin toiha al harishonos mipnei she'im ba adam liachid lo shem toiha v'nimlach lekoroi b'shem acher ki lo lavash tzura sheyichpos by Hashem klal v'tzura hanelbeshes l'chomer hazeh nikra ois bahu mila morkeves klemar boy hu v'zeh she hakasuv v'zeh she zehu she amar v'zehu she hakasuv zehu she amar hakasuv v'zehu she amar hakasuv v'nata alav kav toihu v'avnei boihu ki hakav hu asher boi yidcham ha'oimein michsheves binyanoi mashem mikave lasois miloshin kave el Hashem v'ha'avanim heim tzuras habinyan v'achar shamar ki mitchila b'maimar achar echad bara shemayim ba'aretz v'kol tzvam chazar perish ki ha'aretz achar habriya haisa toihu kloimar ein by mamish v'haisa vayu ki hilbish haisa tzura uperish b'tzura hazois dalad yisoideshahim ha'esh v'hamayim v'ha'afar v'ha'avir umilas ha'aretz koleles l'arba'asan k'moi v'yichulu ha'shemayim v'aretz v'chol tzva'am shekolel kol kador hatachtoin v'esh nikra choshech mipnei she'esh hayisoides chashecha v'elu haisa aduma haisa me'ira lanu halayla v'hamayim shenigval bahem ha'afar nikra'o tahoim v'lochen nikra'im me hayam tahoimos k'dichsiv tahoimos yichas yumu kaf'u sahoimos b'lev yam v'nikra karka hayam tahoim k'dichsiv malicham b'sahoimos k'sus b'midbar v'ha'avir nikra ruach v'kvar noida ki yisoidis arba makshe achas v'ha'amoid shala hu agol ha'aretz v'hamayim makifim al ha'aretz v'avir makif al hamayim v'esh makif al ha'avir v'amar ha'kasav ki ha'aretz lavsha tzura v'haya ha'esh makif l'mala al hamayim v'afar ha'orvim v'aruach min ha'sheves v'nichneses b'choshech u'merchefes al pnei hamayim v'nikuda hazoi shelavsha ha'tzura v'haisa bayu hi shachachamim kairin haisa even shesiya shemimena hush sa ha'olam v'hine perish ha'ksuvim b'tchila bara lehim me'ayin ha'shemayim ubara me'ayin ha'saretz v'ha'aretz b'havra'a haisa sayu v'haisa vayu u'bahem choshech mayim v'afar v'ruach noisheves al hamayim. Rabbi Yitzchak said that God had no need to begin the Torah prior to chapter 12, verse 2 in Exodus, until the words, HaChodesh Hazav V'Gomer, this month will be the first of the months for you, etc. Nachmanides, in justifying Rabbi Yitzchak's comment, writes that the story of creation is of great consequence and provides the root for our faith in God, and that anyone who does not believe what is written in that chapter does not believe that this present universe is God's creation, but believes that the universe preceded God in historical terms. He who does so is an outright heretic and has no share in God's Torah at all. Chapter 12 in Exodus contains the first commandment addressed specifically to the Jewish people as a people. The commandment of circumcision also applies to those of Abraham's descendants who would not be Jews. Editors know, I think, or I don't know what ED is. Notwithstanding the latter considerations, seeing the fact that God created the universe is not spelled out anywhere else in the 5 books of the Torah, it was important to record this vital message at the very beginning, seeing that the story of creation had been handed down verbally by one generation to the next during the 2,448 years which preceded the giving to the people of Israel of the written Torah. But Yitzchak was correct in saying that inasmuch as people had such a tradition already, the written Torah could have commenced only with chapter 12 in Exodus, and the legislative part of the Torah would have been unimpaired. God considered it imperative to dictate to Moses the sequence of the 6 stages of creation, culminating in the creation of man, and God assigning man to be in charge of the life-supporting part of the universe, in other words, earth. Rabbi Yitzchak's comment is especially pertinent as the Talmud in Chagiga 11 warns those who have acquired knowledge of how earth came into being to conceal such knowledge from the public at large. We could have questioned then why the Torah at that stage saw fit to reveal to one and all what only a chosen few had been aware of. What God wanted us to know that he was at home on earth in a place called Gan Eden, and that but for man having been expelled from there due to his sin, he could have remained in constant direct contact with his Creator without the need for any intermediary. It also was necessary to record that after the total corruption of mankind, save for a single family, the Creator saved that family and destroyed the surface of the earth during the deluge. These short paragraphs summarizing over 1,600 years of the history of mankind serve as a warning to later generations of what might happen if they too would become guilty of deliberately flouting the Creator's design collectively. Seeing that the inhabitants of the land of Canaan behaved in a manner most displeasing to God, the Torah, by giving us a short history of man, explains that the forced removal of the Canaanites from their land was no more than what they had brought upon themselves by ignoring history. Still on the quote by Rashi of what Rabbi Yitzchak said, etc., notwithstanding the fact that mankind as a whole had received 7 other commandments, the commandment to sanctify the new moon was the first commandment addressed to only a single nation, the Jewish nation. Seeing that at that point the Jewish people still constituted an integral part of mankind as a whole, and they were all subject to these 7 universally applicable commandments, it might have been deemed appropriate to commence the Torah, the book containing legislation addressed exclusively to that nation only, with the point at which the first of such national commandments was introduced. Rashi explains, therefore, that by commencing the Torah at Bereshis Bara, the Torah wanted to demonstrate not only that God was the Creator, but that He is also the sole and undisputed owner of His universe, and may decide which nation is entitled to live on which part of the earth. In other words, if the Jewish people supplanted the Canaanites in the land of Canaan, and they were helped by numerous supernatural miracles, in doing so, it was clear that their success was God's will, that it was not robbery instigated by Moses and Joshua, their leaders. There appears to be a contradiction here, seeing that when the Torah describes who lived in the land of Canaan during Avram's time, the Torah first refers to the Canaanites living there, Genesis 13, verse 7, whereas in chapter 14, 18, Melchizedek, a Semite, is described as king in Jerusalem, in Salem, in Shalim. We would have to answer that the only minute part of the land of Canaan not yet taken over by the Canaanites was the city of Jerusalem. Still, seeing that Canaan had been cursed by his grandfather Noach to be a slave to Noach's other 2 sons, how are we to explain the ascendancy of that nation at that time? Moreover, why should the Canaanites have dispossessed the descendants of Shem more than the descendants of Japheth? The Torah may wish to hint that seeing the Canaanites obtained their homeland by dispossessing the Semites, the people relatively most loyal to God, already put a great question mark on their legal and moral right to occupy the choicest land on earth. The Canaanites, the most morally corrupt nation, took aim at the Semites, the most morally superior. Rashi explains the word Bereshis as being in a construct mode to the verb bara, He created. In other words, the line is to be understood as, at the beginning of God's creating heaven and earth, the earth was in a state of chaos. At that point, God issued the directive, let there be light. Accordingly, the only thing God created on the first day was light. Nachmanides explains the words Bereshis bar Elohim es hashamayim v'haaretz as meaning that God's first creative activity constituted of His calling into existence out of total non-existence, heaven and earth. This earth, however, was something so insubstantial, something referred to as tayu vavayu, matter which was ready to assume definitive form and substance at a subsequent stage. This matter, tayu vavayu, is equivalent to what the ancient Greeks called hayuli. The meaning of the word bara is the creation of something of substance which had never possessed any substance at all, known in philosophy as ex nihilo. Subsequent to this act of creating matter out of pure spirit, any other creative activity made use of this basic and original raw material. Such stages of creativity and of creative activity are described as yitzira, providing form and substance, but are never referred to as beriah, creation. The original, not quite definitive form and shape of that matter is referred to in the Torah as vayhu. At that stage of heaven, at that stage, heaven and all its components consisted of a single raw material, and earth and all it is comprised of consisted of another single raw material. According to Rashi on Kohelet 7 verse 19, the word describes the super-terrestrial wisdom with which God created the universe, a wisdom that leaves even the wisest of men in utter amazement. Taiha, transliteration from the ancient Greek. Both the raw material used to create heaven and that used to create earth are unique and distinct, and the word bara refers exclusively to the creation of these two phenomena. The names Tayu and Vayu given by the Torah to these raw materials are intended to forestall man changing the names in question and renaming them to suit his purpose. The words are composites. In other words, Bai Hu parallels Isaiah 34 verse 11. V'nata eleha kav sayu ve'avne vayu, and he shall measure it with a line of chaos and with weights of emptiness. The word kav is derived from kaveh, hope. In other words, the builder employs the plumb line to check if the results of his efforts justified his hopes and expectations. Avne vayu refer to the stones which the building consists of. The foregoing is taken from Nachmanides. After the Torah reported that initially God created heaven and earth, it reverts to the subject of earth, explaining that after the initial creative activity producing tangible matter, the phenomenon known as earth, in contrast to that known as heaven, was in a state of tayu, meaning tangible matter devoid of distinct shape and contours, so that it was best described as vayu. As God proceeded to provide it with distinct shape and contours, this meant that what had originally been a single raw material now became split into the four basic raw materials we are familiar with, in other words, fire, water, earth, and atmosphere, air, wind. Ever since that stage of development, whenever we refer to the word haaretz, we mean the phenomenon which is composed of varying proportions of those four raw materials. When the Torah refers to the completion of God's creative activity on the seventh day and describes it as vayichulu hashamayim va'aretz v'chol tzvam, it refers to the totality of what is known in our literature as the olam hatachton, the lower universe, the part of the universe inhabited by living bodies. The word chayshech describes the element fire, because the original fire is black. Had it been reddish, it would have illuminated the night, so that the darkness of night would be impossible to observe. The water, which is the raw material used to mold the dust of the earth, is referred to by the Torah in our chapter as Tahaim. This is why the waters of the ocean are referred to as Tahaimais, as in Exodus 15:8. Kafai Tahaimais b'lev yam. The normally mobile waves became inert, as if frozen in the midst of the ocean. The bedrock of the ocean is referred to as Tahaim, as we know from Isaiah 63:13. Malichim b'Tahaimais kisus b'midbar. He guides them through the depths of the sea as one guides a horse through the desert. In our context here, what we know as air is referred to as ruach. It is a well-known fact that the combination of these four raw materials comprise what we know as aretz, the globe we all inhabit. The pillar holding this lower universe together is the globe of earth, surrounded by water and most of its surface surrounded further by the atmosphere we call air or ruach. The fire in turn surrounds this atmosphere. The heat of the sun emanates from beyond the atmosphere. What our verse reveals is that this phenomenon described as aretz was dressed up in a shape, meaning that the element fire surrounded it on the outside, the atmosphere air. Ruach being an element in constant motion, interweaving with the other elements, the innermost spot within all these layers is known in the language of our sages as Even Shasiya, the foundation stone of the earth. In other words, the stone which waters the entire globe. To sum up the meaning of the first two verses is, at the beginning God created heaven and he created earth, both out of non-existent matter. When the earth was first created, it was in a chaotic state, devoid of form and contours, a mixture of the four basic elements, fire, water, earth, and wind, none of which have been defined as yet as to their functions.